Mommy Never Did Spit by Treese B. Nanny Josephine told us never to spit, but Tom always found a way to do everything Nanny told us not to do. "It's most positively disgusting," Nanny would say, and Tom would get punished. But I, as Tom would say, was apple pie, goody-goody. We played amongst the hedges in the luscious gardens of bright colors on the golden diaphanous afternoons of our youth in front of the large white mansion with yellow trim. My mother would sit on the expansive porch with its small spiral wood columns that held up the eaves, in her rocking chair, airing herself with her white feather fan that was intertwined with gold ribbon. I always thought she looked like a princess as she sat above us in her white lace gown and large-brimmed white sun hat, watching us dart in and out of the pathways as we played tag or hide-and-go-seek while she drank her lemonade. On cooler days, she would dart in and out of the bushes, laughing hysterically as she chased us. Sometimes she would kneel in the garden and plant roses of every color. White and yellow were her favorites. I remember running up to her one light summer day and hugging her hard as she knelt digging in the dirt. "Child," she said in her lilting voice, "you startle me so." She smiled gently and then wiped her gloved hand across her forehead to push away a stray auburn curl from her brow, leaving behind a smudged trail of soil. Her bright green eyes glinted with gold, and she looked up towards the sun and said, "Tara, my love, could you ask Nanny to bring me a glass of cool lemonade? The sun is mighty treacherous today." Her skin was so powdery pale and looked as soft as goose down. She always looked so fragile, like my dolls with the porcelain hands and heads and the cloth bodies. Nanny Josephine lived in a small brick cottage behind our home. She was round and dark and rosy cheeks and always wore an apron and gave us fresh-baked cookies. Nanny would tell us stories at bedtime and make sure we didn't get into too much trouble. "Dang it, Tara," Tommy would say when I would win at checkers. "Tommy, give me your hand for a whack. You know we don't abide cussing. It's not proper," Nanny would say with a concerned yet perturbed look on her face. She would sigh and say, "How many times must I correct you, young man?" Daddy worked a lot and was disturbingly quiet. He was tall and lean, with short dark hair, dark eyes, and a bushy mustache that tickled when he kissed you goodnight. Daddy would take Mama out to gala events. They would get all dressed up for a ball or the opera or some grand social occasion. Once on Christmas Eve, I snuck out of my room late at night to see if I could catch Santa Claus coming down the chimney. I didn't catch Santa, but I saw Daddy holding Mommy closely under the mistletoe, kissing her gently. I watched for a time while he danced her about in front of the marble fireplace, and they laughed gracefully with soft joy, while the flickering fire shadows twirled on the ceiling. Our mother had been a preacher's daughter and had lost her mind a few years after Tommy was born. She would only sleep in the kitchen on the cold formica floor, or sometimes on the table. The only time she slept in her room was during the day, when she didn't feel well. I remember coming home from school and running up the stairs to show my mother my good grades. Nanny stopped me as she shut the door to Mommy's room behind her. "Your mother is resting, child. You can talk to her later." But I never did. Daddy never seemed much to me, but he gave Mom all he had, and Tommy loved Dad dearly with loads of chocolate-faced kisses. When I was 10, they sent my mother away. Daddy was all we had left, and Nanny Joe. Daddy mostly worked and watched television. We had one of the first color sets in our neighborhood, but Daddy insisted on watching the old black and white, so Tommy and I could watch our shows on the color one. One morning, after Mommy had left, Nanny was screaming and rushing us around. "Come now, come!" She shook me away. Tommy was standing beside her, holding her hand and rubbing his eyes. "What's the dang hurry, Nanny?" Tommy whispered in his tiny, sleepy voice as he tugged on her hand. "No cussing, Mr. Tom," Nanny said, snapping her fingers across the back of his hand. "Miss Terry, you get up now." "Nanny Joe, what's happening?" I asked, twisting out of my bed and into my slippers on the floor. For the first time, I noticed the gray lines in Nanny Josephine's dark hair. "You're coming to stay in the cottage with me for a while." She hurried us past the room where Daddy often slept in his big plush maroon chair with the television on. The room with the dark wood panel walls with the animal heads and a trophy case, a bar, and the gun case. Sometimes Daddy would sit and clean his guns in the room as he hummed a tune he had heard on the radio. Daddy's study was full of strange people. "Don't look in there," Nanny shouted as she pushed us past the room, down the hall into the kitchen, and out the back door of the kitchen into the snowy morning like a wave in front of her ample body. We tromped the path to her home, watching our breath make smoke in the air. She tucked us in her bed and rubbed our feet as she mumbled things I could barely hear. "Everything will be just fine. Don't you worry none. Nanny will take care of you. I'm the only family you have left. We'll be just fine. You'll see." She sobbed every once in a while and then continued mumbling. The lawyer already talked to me. He said Mr. Worthy left a will saying I would be the one to take care of you. I'll be your guardian. You just don't worry." I drifted off to sleep as she continued, speaking to herself quietly, as if she was singing or humming a song over and over again that lulled my mind to sleep. I think Nanny had been a gypsy in her younger days. She had purple skulls with tiny silver bells lining the edges, a crystal ball, and books on voodoo. She also had an altar to the Virgin Mary and crosses over her doors. She burnt many candles and crossed herself many times the next few days as strangers and policemen talked to her and as we clung to her and pestered her with questions which she seemed unable to answer. We all moved back into the big house, and Nanny Joe would say over and over again, "Mary gave me strength to do what's right. She burnt sweet-smelling herbs to cleanse the air." Tommy cried one night for Daddy. "Where's my daddy, Nanny? I want my daddy," he screamed as she rocked him in her arms on his bed. I ran to his room when I heard him scream, and Nanny was there holding him as I stood in the doorway. She held out her hand to me, and I ran to her side. "Now, Tomatera, your dad is dead and is in heaven now." She rushed the words out as if they were too painful to vocalize fully. Tommy was just 8 and still believed in Santa Claus. "You understand, Tommy?" I looked at him seriously, and he shook his head no. "That means we'll never see Daddy again." I didn't cry because I was trying to be strong for Tommy. "I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I won't listen to you. You both lies. Daddy's taking me fishing tomorrow. You're just jealous, you are." He put his hands over his ears and ran out of the room. We hadn't been allowed to go to the funeral, but Nanny took us to the grave every Sunday to place flowers from the garden on top of the stone. Until Tommy was 15, he waited and held on to a secret hope that Daddy would return to the big house again. But he never did. Nanny, I know I've been the cause of most of your headaches over the past 7 years. But I know it wasn't your fault my father died, Tommy said to Nanny one Sunday at Daddy's grave. It wasn't you that caused my headaches, dear boy. But the night I rushed you away so you wouldn't see the mess your father had made of himself. I'd gone in to cover him with a blanket and found him that way. When I was 18, Nanny Joe took me to see my mother. The doctors didn't think it would be good for us to visit her until we were of legal age and could make up our own minds about seeing her. She looked the same. 8 years had elapsed, and she looked just the same as the summer days hazy with sunshine. I felt 10 years old again. My mother didn't know Father was dead. So many years had passed, and no one had told her because they felt she wasn't ready to hear it. Where's your father? I wore my new dress Josephine brought me yesterday, just for him. He was supposed to visit me yesterday, but he never came. He'll have to take me to the opera for that faux pas. You, child, look wonderful, all grown up. How come it took so long to come visit? Daddy's dead, Mom, I said to snap myself out of the trance. I wasn't going to be like her. I wasn't going to join her in her world. I was angry at her for still being alive, yet useless to us, for leaving us alone without her. Even though I knew she couldn't help herself or change what had happened, I wanted to hurt her as she had hurt me and Tommy, as she had hurt Daddy. I shouldn't have said it. She went into a corner and shrank down into it and disappeared. I went with Tommy to see her 2 years later, when he was 18, but she really hadn't left the corner. She looked at me like I was a stranger, but flirted with Tommy shamelessly. You are a mighty handsome man. You remind me of a beau I once had. Would you mind fetching me some lemonade, child, while I speak with this young man? She wet herself as she spoke. The stain spread warmly across the white pants she was wearing. Her hair was tangled, and she smelled. She looked awful this time, and the golden glint was gone from her eyes. I left to get something to drink for all of us and stopped to talk to the doctors on my way back. The doctors told me that she had been in the mental institution during the times when shock treatment was a common practice. They felt she would spend the rest of her days with them, and those days were numbered. She had rarely slept since I had put her in that corner by breaking her illusions with the truth. I joined Tommy and Mother walking outside on the sanitarium grounds. It was a bright summer day. Here's your lemonade, I said as Tommy gave me a strange look and then turned and spit on the grass. Spitting is such a nasty habit, so ungentlemanly. You're much too handsome to spit. It ruins your mind, you know. She sipped her lemonade and fanned herself with her hand. We must be going now, I said this. As I said this, her eyes looked at me so sadly my heart broke. Tell your father to come visit, won't you? Yes, I will, Tommy replied as he grabbed my hand and we walked away. I turned for one last look, and she was waving to us. I could see the sun shining off her tears on her face. We mostly talked about Dad as if he were still alive. Once she realized I was her son, Tommy said as we waved her back, and then walked out the gates. Tommy joined the Navy a few years ago and is going to be a technical engineer. Nanny Joe died last year. I'm married and have 5 and an 8-year-old of my own. I'll watch them run down the same garden paths of the big house Tommy and I once had, and I remember my days of innocence. The estate fell to Tom and I when we were both of age, but Tom didn't want anything to do with the property. I maintained the big house as an historical artistic community center. One room is my studio full of canvases painted over the years, mostly of ghosts and dreams never realized, but some of the present, with the laughter of my children cascading through the watercolors or oils. I'm living in Nanny Joe's cottage beyond the swimming pool with my family. The kids love it here. My husband wants to move. He says it isn't normal. I cry and we stay. I know we have to leave. I can hear the echoes of the past and my mother's voice saying, "Nanny, would you please count the roses in the garden? I want to make sure none of them have died."